abilities to reason have been developed in a context of, originally what we see as mundane living, which is accommodating our feelings and needs. Our needs for warmth and comfort and food and perhaps fellowship and understanding of the things that determine such. So our ability to reason and analyze has developed in an appropriateness to such matters, not in understanding the universe and the nature of God and what matter is, for instance, or what time is, but simply in some pragmatic sense being able to understand all such only in as far as it affects what we found to be important in living, which is waking up in the morning, setting off on the day, having transport to get to work, or getting the kids ready because they've got to go to school in the context in which we live and the society and so on. So our reasoning ability of analysis has developed relative to those needs and experiences, and may not be at all suitable or useful in trying to understand and control things beyond our experience. So I function, for instance, very well in my own society, but if I travel abroad and the culture is different, I'm much handicapped in achieving the sort of mastery of things that I would find almost second nature now at home in my own country and locality. And of course, if there are too many changes happening to a person, then he becomes disorientated, confused, and rather unhappy because, of course, he can no longer simply meet the needs in the straightforward, experienced way that he's used to. The demands on him may be just catastrophic. It's not that he is mentally ill, it's that he is in a situation which he's not been trained and prepared for. So he may look like an adult, but he's a baby in his current circumstances, which are so different to what he's trained in. There's an enormous stress then on the individual, which may result in death, total overload, breakdown, whatever. Important to realize it's not him that's ill, it's his change of circumstances that are inconsistent with what he has been and is still. And you could say, well, he needs to adapt. This is true, but the adaptation has to be built on some continuity of what he has. Unless he was to some sense start as a child, in which case he needs the resources that a child gets, which is a lot of love and care and a greatly privileged accosted environment that nurtures him into this culture, this adult life that he's now been abruptly confronted with, and a massive change to what he was used to. It's not quite simply him that's ill. It's his circumstances that are ill for anyone confronted with such change. So we're saying, in a nutshell, that people that have suffered great change may need rescue into a childlike environment, protected from the severity of all the changes for the time being, that they may adjust happily to some freedom in that totally new situation that they're having to encounter in the end. And this will take resources, won't it? Obviously the use of drugs instead of other resources at such times could be problematic, or side effects, addiction, all the rest of it, that's fairly obvious. What we need is an environment that helps in the transition, not some dampening down of the capacities of the person to experience and express themselves, but an environment in which such is an acceptable freedom to have, that leads them to the environment that they're going to have to ultimately cope with. I mean, they may have lost their job and their wife and injured and so on, and they're having to cope with this change. And assuming not having these things, or it's still a tolerable existence in the society, we need to help them in the transition, or help them in the transition to having these things again, because they're needed in the society, say, like a house and income and so forth. Yeah. Thank you, Dad. I thought to make a note here too that our language also has been developed from the situations in which mankind, our society in particular, has experienced. In other words, it's very useful in handling those, what we might think of as mundane, normal needs of our living in this society. Hence, if we wish to analyse something that's not terribly usual, some specialism will say, for argument's sake, atomic physics, which is not our normal mundane experience and has been for previous generations, then we need a specialist language and very precisely understanding or knowing how we're using such words and definitions to feel our way at all. We are at a loss, you see, to begin with a new science like psychology was once new and so on. We are at a loss because we don't have the language suitable for such. And that has to develop part and parcel with our achievements of understanding in that new field. Our language too incorporates our mistakes in conception and so on. Those words are still there with their ambiguities or misunderstandings or vagueness knitted into them. And they handicap us in the field for which we need language for. We can tell from a person's speech whether they are Christian or not, or of some other religion, or not religious. We can tell from their speech much about their personality. And by understand, I mean we can draw reasonably safe inference quite often as to whether they are safe individuals for us and so forth. So we find the religious person is mindful of his own speech, if you like, that it be to the glory of God, that he doesn't blaspheme, you see. I've said in previous recordings how, because a friend of mine thought that I took God's name lightly, you know, saying, oh God, a bit like the Irish tend to do traditionally. Oh God, where did you get that from? That was blasphemy and not a good idea. It upset him. It annoyed him. About annoyed, it upset him in some sense. And so I thought, well, I can certainly change that for my friend. There's no need to. And I did, and I feel that was one of the first significant steps in the right direction. I actually improved my language. So we've been mindful, haven't we, of what we're thinking and speaking. So we refrain from gossip and criticism and negativity. Isn't that wonderful? And that alone helps us to so majorly put ourselves on track that the mouth speaks of a good heart and the love of God, and the mind and the story unfold accordingly. Thank you so much, Heavenly Father, and thank you so much for your intervention where we fail in such devotion to you. Love you, Dad. Thank you, Dad.